Alrighty. The fingers of the backstreets are syndicates with power and influence rivaling wings. Each of them take after the finger of their namesake, with odd bits and pieces tied to a finger's creed. The thumb exercises and respects authority above everything else, having a hard-on for class, rank, and respect. After all, without a thumb, we can't grip anything, can't climb the ranks, let alone any hierarchy. Then there's the index, a finger that is often cited as the next most important. It offers direction, is very good for pointing, and communication. Just see this funny website that finds your cursor on screen and gets someone to point at it. Every last one of them is pointing with their index finger. Regardless, make no mistake, today's subject is the index, one of the more prominent fingers in Project Moon's works. Essentially, we've got two full arcs worth of their relevance in the form of Messenger Yan and the Oracle's proxy Rian, both of which will get their stripes later in this video. On a side note, I am going to do that intro every single time, going over every finger. May the pinky never actually be reached until their turn. So what is the main conceit of the index? Free will is a lie. Okay, fine. Project Moon's take on the index with the above in mind is a bunch of cult-like fanatics that follow esoteric instructions no matter how violent, impossible, impractical, or otherwise extreme. These come in the form of prescripts, a Star of the City level phenomenon that itself comes in many forms. The most common we see in Project Moon's works is the paper slip, with carefully inscribed instructions. These can range from something as simple as waving to a specific person crossing the street, to stabbing your arm a dozen times while trying to kill somebody. Regardless, though entirely arbitrary seeming, the instructions work in favor of the index a vast majority of the time. The other method of prescript reception we've seen is through a paging device wherein a string of characters is sent to the one undergoing it. They seem to have some kind of cipher or code system to follow, much like your average doctor or medical professional back in the day. Anyhow, we'll cover the workings of the prescript in more detail later on, as that by itself is a whack affair. Like the ring, they too have a uniform of sorts, this one having some variety based on your rank and status within the organization. In general though, they all wear black, formal attire with white cloaks and gold trimmings. The length of their cloak in turn showcases their dedication to the organization, and thus the higher ranked you are within the index, the longer your cloak is bound to be. Most, if not all of them, wield some form of blade, with unique blades being passed out to higher ranking members upon promotion. So how does one receive the index's protection? Oh, that much is quite simple, really. Follow the prescripts given to you. As mentioned prior, they can be simple tasks that involve you greeting or playing around with strangers, from wild, esoteric affairs like killing a painting. As long as you carry it out though, the index will extend its protection to you. Now, because of how strange and often madhouse these prescripts tend to be, there is actually a high amount of interpretation allowed in fulfilling them. Index Proselyte Foss' Uptire story covers quite a few ways to circumvent seemingly impossible tasks, and still manage to receive the grace of the prescript. Anyhow, success or failure isn't exactly immediately rewarded, or punished all the time when it comes to the prescripts. More often than not, a separate prescript will deliver the verdict, or have the follower of said prescript render it upon you. To this end, not following the prescript won't kill you immediately, but will send someone to punish you for your slacking. More often than not, this will be a high-ranking member of the index, a proxy. One must then ask, what's it like joining the index then? How do you even progress up the ranks here? Surprisingly, it's actually quite comparable to Buddhism or any Dharma circle or fellowship. I'll get to those ties later. First off, you'll receive a prescript telling you to join up. Rather, it's an offer to join. Allegedly, you may actually refuse to join, which is surprisingly kind for the city. Anyhow, should you accept, you must place on a blindfold to showcase your dedication to following the prescripts. Yes, you have to be blind to everything else but the prescripts. Congratulations, you are now proselytes, a new recruit to a religion, or in this case, the lowest ranking members of the index. Proselytes move around in packs of 5 to 6, following around an index proxy. They must carry out prescripts given to them in order to progress through the rank, with competency being the main driving factor here. The index is surprisingly a meritocracy. As you progress through your time as a proselyte, you'll be given opportunities to extend the length of your cloak, and when the time is right, or when your competency is proven, you'll likely get promoted to one of the other two main ranks. Those two being Messenger and Proxy, both about equal in measure. For notable proselytes, we've only got one Mirror World Faust, that of which is shown following prescripts and cutting down another member of the index for their falsehoods. Messengers are those that dole out the prescripts. They get their hands on the set of instructions in some way or another before distributing them out to the rest of the organization. The prescript they hand out can be to anyone: proselytes, civilians under the index's protection, proxies, or even other messengers. That is to say, they are the main distribution network of the index. In terms of notable messengers, we only really know Yan from Library of Ruina. They're a seemingly depressed young fella that is more sympathetic to those undertaking the prescripts. It'll lead them down to more extreme measures down the line. In regards to proxies, these are the fellas leading around proselytes and executing upon quite a lot of prescripts alongside them. While they're as slave to the will of the prescript as any other in the organization, they are most often the ones dealing out punishment and executions. To boot, upon reaching the rank of proxy, you may cast off your blindfold and will be given a blade of your own, a more personal effect compared to the side swords often seen carried by the proselytes. Throughout Project Moon's works, we actually get to see quite a few proxies, 5 of them in fact. From Ruina, we've got Esther, a no-nonsense sort that wields a longsword and gets pretty close to embodying the ideal proxy. Hubert, an imposing but more reserved sort, seemingly strict in their adherence to the prescript. They wield a golden gauntlet and a huge blade, according to Gloria. Speaking of, Gloria. They take a lot of joy and exuberance in following the prescript, no matter how gruesome or brutal the task set to them is. They're an absolute fucking unit and wield a bunch of daggers despite their huge stature. Oh, it is also worth noting that Yan has a blade of their own, a huge greatsword that's almost as tall as themselves. Moving along though, we've got 2 weirdos for Limbus's proxies. We've got the nurse father and their apprentice, Rian and Sora accordingly. Starting out with the apprentice, they've got quite a few unusual elements to them. First off is a complete and total reverence towards the prescripts. Second is their reception of the prescripts is through a beeper, a bloody paging device. They are fast, brutal, and exceedingly competent in holding off several members of the LCB, and even landing a clean hit on Dante through their protection. As for their choice of weaponry, well, it starts as a set of shackles and unlocks into a pair of demonic claws. I suppose a blade is a blade at the end of the day. As for Rian, the fella is something of a hollow shell following the prescripts. Rian isn't even his real name and is one taken through the prescripts to boot. As for his choice of weaponry, it's caduceus, a unique vial of morphing liquid that shifts forms according to the prescript received. It retains form throughout the duration of a prescript and changes when a prescript is successful or otherwise fulfilled. The forms we see it take are manifold, those being a hatchet, stiletto, bastard sword, rapier, hammer, greatsword, lance, whip, scythe, and a spork, or spoon. Now for a little extra, Rian is specifically the Oracle's proxy. While this doesn't cut him off from the will of the prescript or anything fancy like that, it does mean he is beholden to one of the gods of the city instead. In this case, Hermes. Allegedly, this is an important role to differentiate within the organization at least. Oh, he also doesn't wear a white cloak at all. Finally, we are privy to just one more rank, and this rank is what makes the index particularly horrifying. Weaver. These are the fellows that tend to the machines that thread together the prescripts. Deep under the city and hidden away from sight, the weavers put together and send off prescripts to messengers through a series of tubes and other delivery systems. We only get to meet one of them, that being Moirai. She's actually my favorite index member. She's cute and has a bloody long cloak. Her namesake is the personification of the Fates in Greek mythology. Real fitting. Anyhow, she doesn't know if she's the only weaver out there, and when told to stop, lets Yan know just how futile it would be to suppress the will of the city. Speaking of, the will of the city. This is what generates the prescripts and is the true identity of them, at least so far as the paper slips are concerned. The whims of Hermes and the Oracle devices notwithstanding. Moirai elaborates upon how every single little movement, every heartbeat and impact above the weaver's chambers echoes down and shifts the pendulums of the looms. Morphs and weaves and blends together some form of script to be interpreted and transcribed upon as a prescript. The process seems absolutely mad to most, but somehow still results in favoring the index and the undertaking of the prescripts. Somehow this process is omnipotent and in full control of the fates, levying every scream, shout, blood-curdling wail, and God knows what other vibration from above as below, to extract meaning and foresight, manipulating the odds and destiny to boil everything down to these bloody paper slips. These same paper slips that are all but futile to resist. The same paper slips that a vast majority of the index's members grow numb in fulfilling. The very same paper slips that seem to know everything there is to know and cannot be truly defied. Anyhow, let me give my spiel on the similarities to Buddhism and one of Ryunosuke Akutagawa's works while we're here. One of the principles of Buddhism is escaping an everlasting cycle of karma by upholding oneself to a bunch of instructions and restrictions. Sound familiar? Well, it's a little more nuanced than just that, so hear me out. Buddhists are made to follow a set of beliefs known as the Prescripts. While most of them are rather innocent and are there to curb back vices, they increase their hold upon you as you rise up the ranks in Buddhist hierarchy and take more and more restrictions upon oneself. The average member of a dharma or fellowship will undertake anywhere between 3 and 5 common restrictions. These are basics like no drug and alcohol abuse, no adultery, compassion to animals, etc. By undertaking these, you are privy to mindfulness and additional care in your day-to-day life. It's meant to be a more enriching experience and accepting, so they say. As you take on more and more though, you'll eventually be pigeonholed into the way of a monk, not even allowed to buy your own food, but I digress. The index is taking those precepts of Buddhism or of any religion, randomizing them and turning them up to 11 with an almost real form of karma being dealt out within their organization. In the case of the index though, no, you cannot escape the cycle of karma, and you will receive due punishment in this life rather than the next. In making the punishment palpable through an organization such as the index, the belief is no longer just an esoteric way of living, but rather fully enforced and becomes very real very fast. Oh, to further mention, at the point of 200 plus precepts binding you in Buddhism, you may as well be as bound as an index proxy, just that the proxies are way more violent than your typical temple-faring monk. Convenient enough, there's actually quite a few ties to the binds and chains in the index's imagery. Sora is shackled away, Hubert has a mask, and quite a few combat pages feature chains, and the whole concept of unlocking blades is prevalent within their fighting styles. Now what of Akutagawa? Yes, I hate the author, but he is an inspiration for quite a lot of the happenings of Canto 9, and there is one short story that stood out in particular when regarding the index. Shockingly, this wasn't one of his Buddhist ones either. This one is called Fortune. Herein, a pair recounts a story of a woman visiting a temple praying for good fortune and a better life. This results in her getting a delusional vision of said temple's god reciting upon her a set of instructions. She is to follow and obey the next person she happens across on the road. This ends up being a brutish fella that happens to be exceedingly rich. Crazy enough, he proposes to her and they get married that very night. Only then does the regret set in as she realizes the full weight of her situation. She hadn't married some rich man, but a thief with a fresh haul of stolen goods. The regrets pile up and eventually she steals away into the night after beating up a nun guarding the man's treasures. From the safety of her friend's abode, she watches her husband get arrested and taken away, whatever stolen goods remaining, seized by the authorities. Of course, she didn't leave empty-handed, but is notably shaken by the whole experience. As the two finish recounting the story, one of them gets up, letting his compatriot know if all it takes is praying to a god and fulfilling their esoteric instructions to gain wealth and a better life, he would gladly do so. The story ends there. It's a commentary on the whims of fate, the nature of luck, and of course human greed. But it does stand out as pretty much being the loop of the index. Wish for a better life, get prescripts, fulfill prescripts for the grace and karma, but nothing else. While I wouldn't call this the inspiration behind the index as a whole, it is still a funny coincidence that this story lines up so well nonetheless. Since I don't have schools of art to elaborate upon like The Ring, I suppose this is where I should begin noting down the plights of various notable members of the index. Since we've outlined 7 fellas, I suppose we're not lacking, at the very least. Starting simple, let's go with the proxy trio from Ruiner. Esther, as mentioned prior, seems to be the ideal proxy of the index. They're cold, calculating, and uphold the prescripts down to the word. They care not for the technicalities, and only see that the prescript is fulfilled in some way or another. Their page actually gives us a lot of insights into a commonly asked question regarding the prescripts. The fellas would so religiously follow such instructions, wouldn't their fabrication for malicious intent be more prevalent? Well, it seems the process isn't quite so easy, and few know the inner workings in order to do so. Aside from that, the prescripts are all-knowing and would eventually punish one who were to exploit the system. The prescripts know when one has been fulfilled and when one hasn't, and will deal with it accordingly. Knowing all of this, he's one to catch on to Yan's schemes, but goes along with them because a prescript told him to do so anyway. Ultimately, this results in him getting turned into a book when sent to the library by Jan's Prescript. Hubert is similar to Esther, but more rigid in the adherence to prescripts, having far less allowance for loopholes or technicalities, so to speak. A different kind of no-nonsense. When asked to hand over the skewered bodies by the blue reverberation, he's actually more combative as it isn't part of the prescript. Their page gave us details regarding ranks and hierarchy within the organization, especially the notes regarding the initiation as proselytes. Funny enough, it also details the running down of fellas that leave the index. While it may be your will to leave the index, the will of the prescript may think otherwise, and send fellas to hunt you down or otherwise bring you back into the fold. On the other hand, if the prescript stays silent about matters, then it was just the will of the prescript to let you leave. Likewise with Esther though, he meets his fate being booked in the library. Gloria is the happy-go-lucky part of the proxy trio. They are imposing as all hell despite the flippant attitude and have a very jovial attitude in regards to their duties. They are more than happy to go about executions and fulfill the prescripts. Aside from that, their page regards the index as weaponry, claiming that most prescripts can be solved with swords. They go on to ruminate about other weapons and personalized armaments, notably letting us know about Hubert's greatsword and Gloria's own 5 blades. They of course meet the same fates as the other two. Okay, now we can talk about Jan. I am going to fast forward his story since it's pretty much the entire arc the Index goes through in Library of Ruina. Jan is a messenger of the Index that has long tired of the brutality and cruelty of the Prescripts. To this end, they have started fabricating increasingly cruel and gruesome prescripts in an attempt to get people to rebel or otherwise question the content. But, with the fanaticism and faith of the recipients, he only serves to make things far worse. As they keep falsifying prescripts, he wonders why he hasn't been smited down or disposed of yet. All of this coming to a head when he delivers nigh impossible prescripts to the proxy trio. Esther calls out his bullshits, but lets him know that the prescript has long told him to follow every prescript handed out by Jan, regardless of their falsehood. While Gloria feels betrayed, Esther and Hubert do their due diligence and head to the library to meet their fates. After they leave, Jan is tasked with following a prescript of their own, leading them far below the city where they meet Moirai. Jan learns of the will of the city, the nature of the prescripts, and the sheer insanity of the process. Knowing that everything was already predestined and that ultimately their small act of defiance was futile, they begin to distort. After which they find themselves in the library where we get one hell of a boss fight. Like the others, they're booked. Moirai is inextricably linked to Jan's story, at least so far as the Weaver showing off their process. Her attire shows her off as someone who has long resigned themselves to the prescripts, with a huge cloak. More interestingly though, Moirai is the name of the Fates, a set of sisters in some myths that govern destiny. We've got Clotho the Spinner, Lachesis the Allotter, and Atropos, Death. Their role to play in the grand scheme of the universe is to ensure that people live out their destinies as assigned. While Moirai in Ruina doesn't go quite that far in pushing the prescripts, you can draw the parallels from at least Clotho the Spinner and Lachesis the Allotter in the creation of prescripts and distribution of them. Regardless, there's a tall lady under the city that puts together the indecipherable as best as she can, and I consider that pretty dope. More Moirai, please. As for Limbus's representation, dear lord, I am not the most keen on going over this, but here we go. Let's start with Sora. Very timid young girl that is at the mercy of the prescripts. A naive individual, they're surprisingly pleasant until the prescripts and her duties rear their head. At such a point in time, they are no nonsense, quaking in their boots, to frantically fulfill the prescript. If Don's uptight story is anything to go by, they are fanatically devoted to Rian and their beeper as it gives their life meaning. They pretty much live for the prescript and for the approval of Rian, whom they see as a father figure. In terms of her capabilities, she's an ego user with Shin, which places her head and shoulders above way too many individuals in the city. Beyond that, she is socially inept, but in an endearing way. Her attempts to infiltrate the LCE and run along with the LCB are seen through quite transparently. Her brute strength facing down the sinners is not to be scoffed at though, having us bailed out by the Yellow Harpoon. And finally, her erasure at the hands of Yoshu leaves us feeling quite empty. As for Rian, fuck, there's a stupid amount to unpack here, but I'll do my best in making it brief. Rian is an empty vessel for Hermes, a god of the city. He is a puppet in the grand scheme of things and exercises little free will for a majority of his life. As a member of the Index, his competency let him rise up the ranks to proxy, and furthermore, the Oracle's proxy. In doing so, he had replaced his name to Rian. French for nothing. Therein comes the cruelty that Hermes will proceed to place him through in a gross imitation of Roland's life. Rian puts together a happy family, having a child and wife according to the Prescripts. This is likewise torn away by the Prescripts to imitate the loss of Roland's pregnant wife. It's hinted that this affected his mental state greatly, and he holds resentment for such. Even as an empty shell, numb to the Prescripts, it's not like he felt nothing from having lost everything he had built up. Having been through everything Roland had in some way or another, they were functionally turning him into a clone of his bad ending. Anyhow, the similarities don't end there. Instead of utilizing the gloves of the Black Silence to rapidly swap between an entire arsenal of weaponry, Rian utilizes Caduceus, a device of the Oracle as his weapon. It's a vial of amorphous liquid that form shifts into a weapon based on the Prescripts. It allows him to fight in a manner similar to Roland, though notably he isn't spamming out Atelier logic rounds like nobody's business. Caduceus itself is a symbol of Hermes, two snakes surrounding a winged staff. This normally represents a go-between for humanity and the gods. Such is Hermes, but is often mistaken as a symbol for medicine. That one is actually a single snake, being the rod of Asclepius. So no, Hermes isn't supposed to have anything to do with medicine. If anything, he poisons the well and is known as something of a liar, despite being the messenger of the gods. Regardless, the snakes can symbolize many things: immortality, health, etc., so the mistake's source is pretty obvious. Anyhow, as the Oracle's proxy, Rian is more or less in direct one-sided contact with Hermes. Perhaps his source of Prescripts and furthermore Sora's ones are implied to come from a differing source than the usual paper slips, though I wouldn't put it too far away from those sourced by the Weavers, mainly because of all the Greek mythological ties. If we go further beyond that, Hermes could just be the go-between here as well, only passing along the whims of the gods down to Rian rather than his own whims. It's hard to say with Hermes having the lying reputation. I'd more so surmise that the gods are cruel, and Hermes is no different here, but I digress. Until we get further details, whether that be in a future intervallo or otherwise, then it's hard to confirm all the ties and assumptions. Moving along though, Rian is given the task of raising Roshu for the House of Spiders project, in creating a perfect concept incinerator for the Outer Yashiki. Essentially, he's gotten another shot at family, which is just some cruel fate considering his previous one. Fast forwarding the events of Canto 9, he faces off against the Sinners one last time, where it's implied he's ignoring the Prescripts and doing as he likes. This ultimately has him cut clean through by Roshu, where he recalls his first family and the sound of waves. Inevitably, in his defiance of the Prescripts, he is then hunted down by other index proxies. He's quite competent in fending them off, until he finds himself by one of the city's many canals. Here, he receives a Prescript to recite a specific poem, but as he's long had his fill, and wishes one more act of defiance, drives the spork given into his skull, ending his life. There's a lot more to Rian, and this is just the broad strokes, but perhaps someday I'll eventually get around to that Rian video. On a side note, the Hermes GPT memes are funny though, as is putting a loading prompt on the guy, considering how often he looks at the funny beeper. Last I wish to mention on the matter of the index is the logo itself. According to Kim Ji-hoon, the flower is aconites, wolf's bane. This is a highly toxic flower known for potent poisons and plenty of witchcraft associations. Beyond that, it's a sign of chivalry and honor, acting by a code, if you will. It's a smart play on words if you regard the index finger pointed upwards in a shushing motion and the circle below. With the knowledge in mind, it essentially reads as shut up and follow the code. Although it may be poisonous and toxic, you are now part of the cycle of karma, essentially denoting a toxic relationship with the Prescripts, but ultimately allowing you to more transparently accept your fates. It's a very on-the-nose logo compared to the rest, but honestly, it's really well done. That about wraps up the index, some of their inspirations, and some major effects within their running. They're a very cool bunch and well done for a cult-like organization within the city. Again, let me know if you enjoyed this kind of content by liking the video. If this video somehow gets 1,000 likes, I'll cover another syndicate or faction, though I doubt we'll manage this time since the Ring video had the hype of the upcoming Forvis to roll it along. If you want to see more content like this in the future, subscribe to the channel. It goes a long way in pushing the algorithm. Once again, thanks to my patrons Artie and Derp. You can join them getting shouted out on this slot below if you want to further support the channel. Appreciate you listening in.